Mike here at CBI Off-Road. Today we're going to be installing our T3 high clearance rear bumper today. So let's get started. Alright, so first thing we're going to start off with is removing our rear bumper. The first thing we're going to do before we do that is we're going to take our trailer connector. We're going to unplug that. And then we have, depending on what model you have and whether or not you have backup sensors and things, we're going to disconnect these two connectors back here. Once those are all disconnected, we can start unbolting the bumper. Alright, so there's going to be about 7 bolts on each side, 5 here on the side, and then we're going to have 2 more underneath here. We're going to take all of those out, and you don't have to worry about the bumper dropping or anything. It has some pins that are in slots back here that we'll get to on how to pull the bumper off once we get everything unbolted. Alright, so once we got everything unbolted, you do have a couple plates. These can just be discarded. They're can be replaced with our bumper, and then keep all your hardware, because that's what we're going to use to put the bumper back on. So once you have the bumper unbolted, it is kind of hung up, and it has these small pins here that are in a slot in the frame, and so in order to get the bumper off, we're going to lift the bumper up and then pull it out. And sometimes it can kind of be a pain. You're definitely going to want to probably have 2 people just to get it off evenly. Otherwise it gets stuck and uneven in situations. You lift it up.
Are you ready?
Yep. Alright, so one thing you are going to need from your factory rear bumper is just your 7-pin. And you just push in on these 2 clips. That thing pops right out. Alright, so our harness for our trailer connector, there's one of 2 ways you can make this work. Unfortunately, in the position it's in, it's a little bit too short to reach the connector once our bumper is installed. So you can go through and loosen up a bunch of the clips on the harness and pull it basically as far forward as you can. Or the other option is you can just cut it and extend it about 3 inches, and that's what we're going to end up doing today. Our plug or harness connector, we went ahead and extended it about 3 inches right there. We do make sure to use the same or slightly larger gauge wire for all the different sizes. There's 3 different size gauge wires, so you want to make sure that you're at least a minimum of the same or slightly larger. And yeah, so once we get that all hooked up, we're just going to wrap that back up, and we're going to be good to go. Okay, so we're getting ready to set our marks and tape this off so we know where we're cutting. First mark we're going to make is right here on the back. We're going to go 2 3/4 inches down from the bottom of the tail light, which pretty much ends up being right at this small bump in the bed that you can kind of see, and so it's a pretty good easy mark. And that's where we're going to start off on the rear. Now on the front, we're not going to be going off of a measurement. We're actually going to be looking in here at the fender liner. It's kind of hard to see, but you can see a small little cutout opening in your fender liner here. And we're going to go right about in the middle of it is where we're going to mark that off at. So once we get I just use a pencil, you can use a Sharpie, something. That's marked there, and then I have it marked over here on the other side. So I'm just going to take the regular green painter's tape, and you can start from really either side. Set it right at your mark, and then we're just going to try and come across about as straight as we can. And you probably want to give yourself just a little bit extra on the end, because we're going to probably loosen this up and try to get it real flat. Alright, so I'm just using just a 40-inch ruler to kind of help keep my line straight on this. And we'll go ahead and start pushing this down into place. All right, so to cut this, we just use an electric 5-inch cutoff wheel. I'm going to start off by cutting under my tape line, and then once it's cut, I'm going to take my sander and I'm actually going to sand up to that tape line, and we'll go from there. So we have our bumper cut here. I leave this stuff hooked up just so it doesn't just drop when we're trying to cut this thing. So once you do have it cut, you can go ahead and there's quite a few little 10mm bolts here. Take these 3 off, and there's going to be about 3 more behind it. And then we also have a few clips that we're just going to cut out afterwards. All right, so we got about 4 clips right there, and then we got 1 right here in the middle. We're just going to cut them off with some dikes, get them out of the way. There we go. All right, so we're gonna finish taking this bracket off. There's just 2 10mm bolts holding it on the back side up here. All right, so with our first cut made, as you can see, we cut right below our tape line. We're gonna go ahead and take 5-inch sanding disc. We're going to sand that up to that tape line and see where we're at as far as if we're high enough, and we'll go from there. All right, so once we have that sanded up, one of our indicator points for where we want our cut to really be is this orange clip right here. So we want to be right about to the bottom of it, all the way up to about halfway through it is what you can, kind of our threshold that we stick within there. So this one, we're right at the bottom of it. We're probably going to take this and sand it up just a little bit more, just to have that little bit of extra room there. One other thing that I do to help get basically as straight a line across there as I can is I just have, again, this 40-inch ruler, and I kind of set it up at the back and just kind of try and follow that body line. And I kind of look down at it and see where I got any kind of high or low spots basically at. Right now, I'm just a little bit high in the middle, so that means I'm going to go ahead and pull my tape off of here, and then I'm going to sand this end up just a little bit at a time until I get just a nice and straight cut across there. Now we got this all cut. Got it pretty nice straight line on there. Once you're satisfied with the line that you have going, you can go ahead and finish cleaning, just all the little stuff off there, and finish it off with the trim that we send for you. All right, so once you're satisfied with your cut, I just use a small deburring tool to just clean up all the rest of the stuff. a small flat file, anything like that, it's going to work basically in the same sense to just kind of clean up all your edges. And once you're done with that, we'll go ahead and put the trim on. Next, we're going to be installing our side support brackets for the fenders, because they do kind of get a little loose there when we cut this out of there. So these are just going to be there for extra support. We're going to have to drill a hole behind our fender flare, which should be pretty simple. You don't have to pull the fender flare off. We'll go ahead and start doing that real quick. We do use our original bolts that were holding that first bracket in place there. So we can go ahead and put those back in. You want to kind of tighten those down just to where you can still move it, but they're sitting pretty flush up against that. We got this in place. We're going to go ahead and push it up kind of to where we want it, up in here, and then we're just going to go ahead and mark where we want to drill our hole. Once that's marked, we can go ahead and just pull these back out, and we'll go ahead and drill our hole. Alright, so as we can see, we got our hole marked right there. So we're going to go ahead and drill it. I'm just using a 5/16 drill bit. Make sure to not drill too far. Obviously, we don't want to go through the fender flare. And then once that's drilled, we can just kind of pull the fender flare away, and we can put the nut through there, and we'll put our bolt through. There we go. All right, with our hole drilled, we can go ahead and put our side support bracket back in place. So with the side support bracket in place and our hole drilled, we got our 5/16 bolt. It's 3/4 of an inch long, and then we just got our serrated flange nut. We're just gonna line this back up in there, spin that through, kind of pull the flare out a little bit, and slide that nut up in there, and we can just start threading it in. And then we can go ahead and tighten everything down. To finish this off, we have some trim. We're just going to go ahead and butt it right up against the fender flare, because if we put it underneath, it just kind of pushes the fender flare out, looks a little goofy. So we're just going to kind of cut it to the angle of the fender flare. And once it's there, then we can go ahead and push it up. Follow it around the corner. And then I just follow it right down to this edge, and then we can just cut off any excess. So once you got your trim on there, we're done with this side. We can go ahead and start on the next. so we're getting ready to put our bumper on. What we're gonna wanna do is this top rear hole, we're gonna go ahead and just thread this one in by hand, just a little bit. And the bumper's actually slotted, so it's gonna come up and slide right around that, so it will be a little bit easier to put the bumper on. Yep. As you can see, you definitely want a friend to help you put that bumper on. It is pretty heavy. It's a little bit difficult getting everything lined up, but we do have ours on. So now we're gonna go through, we're gonna finish putting all of our bolts in, get everything lined up, and then we'll go through and adjust it as we need, and then we'll finish off the front brackets that we have to bolt in place, and we should be good. All right, so I put these bottom ones in first. Let's help just pull the bumper up. They're not tight, so we can still move the bumper, but it makes it easier getting the side ones in, getting those lined up. Now again, we're not tightening these all the way down, we're just getting them all snugged up so we can still have adjustment in the bumper and move it around as we need to. So once we got our bumper on, we got it adjusted where we want it. I just have a nice, just small gap right between here, just set forward. You can also make sure to look at kind of where it's sitting in line with your fender and your bed, just to kind of get it lined up. And then we'll go ahead and tighten those down, and then we'll move on to the brackets on the sides. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and putting our 1/2-inch bolt through here. It's gonna go right through the frame. We're gonna have a 1/2-inch bolt with a washer, have a 1/2-inch strut washer, and then a serrated flange nut. And that's gonna hold these sides in place so they keep from, you know, wiggling around and everything, making noise, stuff like that. So now that we got the side support brackets bolted to the frame, we can go ahead and pull our fender liners down. We can trim them up. We'll show you how we do it here. That is kind of optional, whichever way you want to do it. And then we'll get those trimmed up, get everything kind of tidied up before we start assembling swing arms and getting ready to put swing arms on the bumper. So our fender liners, we're going to trim up a little bit. We're just basically just going to take this little section right out of there, just so it fits back behind there a little bit easier, and then we'll finish tying it up. All right, so to tie these up, what we're gonna do is, now that it's cut, we're just gonna kind of fold it under the bottom of this bracket we have here. And then I'm just gonna take and I'm gonna drill 2 holes in it. And then we're just gonna run zip ties around it. We're just gonna hold it in place. It'll stay nice and tight. Shouldn't have any issues. You can always just trim it off here. You just don't really have anywhere to to tie it off to, so that's why we go around it right there. And these are a little bit long, so I got 2 zip ties together. So we're just gonna slide these through here, bring them back around. Get those nice and tight. All right, so once your bumper's all installed, we can go ahead and start putting some of our stuff back in there, our factory trailer harness hitch, and we'll go ahead and just pull this through here. It's just a little bit easier to get it clipped in while holding it. Once that's clipped in, we just turn it in, smack it in there. There we go. All right, so we're getting ready to put in our new license plate light that's going to go in our bumper. I've already extended ours out, but one of the things you are going to do, you are going to get 2 little Phillips screws and some small nuts. We're going to take these factory screws out of there because we're not going to use those. And all we're going to do is just slide our new bolts through there. Grab the 2 nuts, and we're going to go ahead and slide that thing through. All right, so we're getting ready to put our license plate on. We have our bracket. It is a flip-up style because it hides our hitch. And we're gonna go ahead and put the bracket on first, and then we'll put the license plate and everything on. All right, so we got those in there. We're gonna go ahead and tighten it. It's 5/32 Allen for those button heads. Now those are tight, we'll go ahead and put the license plate on. We are using the shorter ones, fit through here. We're gonna have to kind of lift that up a little bit. Hold those. Fold it back down, put the new bolt in. There, and fold that down. Go ahead and tighten that back up. Now our license plate light and everything works, and our license plate we can move out of the way, have our hitch, everything functions. So we're getting ready, we're gonna wire up our license plate light. We're just gonna tap it back into just the factory wiring. So we're gonna pull the tail light out. Go. We'll just go ahead and unplug these for now and set the light out of the way. All right, so I just pulled our harness that we pre-installed. up through the hole right here where the rest of the harnesses come through. I did give myself a decent amount extra that I can just now cut off to length. So we're going to cut this off. And we're going to melt this out of this sheathing off of here. All right, so once we got that spread, we can kind of pull these out of here. We're gonna need a little bit extra. Take that off. We're gonna use a Permaseal butt connector and then just a small eyelet to use for our ground. And these LED lights, they're a little bit weird the way they wire them. Your black is actually you're gonna want to go to your power, and your white is actually going to be your ground. It's just the way that this company designs theirs and just wires them in. So I just pulled the wires out of their sheathing right there. So the wire we're going to be tapping into is going to be our green wire. That's going to be our running lights. So that's going to mean it's going to come on anytime running lights are on. We're going to go ahead and have the license plate light on. Now we're going to take our black, tie those together. Crimp that on, and we're going to crimp the other end in. We'll go ahead and heat shrink this. All right, so now that our wire is tapped in to our running lights, we can go ahead and put our ground on. And we just use this bolt right here that's part of the body paneling being bolted together. And that is a M6 by 1 is the thread pitch. We have some nuts here already that fit it. And we're just going to go ahead and slide that on there and go ahead and tighten that down. Now we can go ahead and put our light back in. We go ahead and bolt everything back together. All right, so now that we got our tables installed, we're going to go ahead and get ready to install our bearings in here. We're going to go ahead and clean this up. Might have some residual, sand, dirt, stuff from being powder coated that you want to clean out of there before we put our anti-seize and stuff in there. I just use a wire brush. You can really just scrape it out, take a little sandpaper, or really just whatever you want to clean that stuff out. Now we got everything cleaned out, we're just going to take some anti-seize. We're just going to give a nice layer in there where we're going to be putting our bearings in so that they go in there easy, and it also just kind of adds an extra layer of protection seal on the bearings just to help keep anything from getting in there. So, got 3 bearings. One is going to go up top, and then 2 of them are going to be in the bottom. Let's go ahead and put this in. I'm just using a rubber mallet to start this. Once it gets down in there a little bit, move to just a standard regular sledge, and I just use a socket because it's got a nice base on it to push this in there. Once the one's started, you can go ahead and put the second one in place. And those should sit nice and just almost flush. They'll stick out just a little bit, and that's just where they sit. So we're getting ready to put our bump stop in. It's going to have our little Allen head bolt and then a nut. It's going to be a 3/16 Allen. We're just going to go ahead and set that in there. Put kind of the rounded edge to the outside as kind of your ramp in order to get onto the bumper when the swing arm settles on there. We'll just go ahead and tighten that up. Before we get ready to put our swing arms on, there are a couple things we want to do. This is just some coarse emery cloth, and I just like to clean up the spindles. Typically there's like maybe a little bit of powder coat or different things that are left over on it. So this just helps to make sure that the bearings and everything slide over it really smoothly. So we'll just go ahead and run this on there a couple times. Just get everything cleaned up. Now any excess powder coat and things are all gone. All right. Let's go ahead and put these swing arms on. You may need help from a friend, depending on what all you're putting on the swing arm. But I'm just using a rubber mallet again. And we'll Now with our swing arms on, we can get our spindle caps ready. We have our pull pins here. These just thread into place, and once you get those in, we can set these on there and bolt them into place. All right, so before we put our spindle caps on, we want to put our seals on, and they're just going to go right up in here. And that's why our top bearing only has one instead of two, is so we can fit a seal down in there. Help keep them clean, get no water, things like that in there. So we're getting ready to put the spindle caps on. We're going to go ahead and just put a little bit of anti-seize on these bolts real quick, just to help make sure they don't get seized up or anything down the road after all the dirt and grime, things like that. So you got that on there, we can go ahead and put them on. So we got these button heads in here. They're a 7/32 Allen. Once you get both of them in there, you go ahead and tighten them up. You may have to move the swing arm a little bit out of your way to get to them a little bit easier. We'll tighten the lock nut here. All right, so once we got the spindle caps on, we're gonna go ahead and get our latch ready. So kind of a couple things going on. First, we're gonna put the smaller 13mm nuts on first. These are gonna be a walk nut. So we're gonna go ahead and thread those down on each side. So we got those threaded down. We have our pin here. As you can see, there's one side that's flat, the other side that's just rounded. We're gonna go ahead and put the flat side to our walk nuts that we're gonna go through. We're gonna slide this through here. That's gonna go in, and now we can put our walk nuts on there. We're gonna wanna leave everything just kind of loose for the time being. Depending on if you have a single or dual swing arm. Single swing arm, this will go on to the bumper as well. But today we're doing a dual swing arm, so we just got the latch today. All right, so once we got our latch ready, we're gonna have our button heads. They're 3/16 Allen. We're gonna bolt it right into our captured nuts. I do have a little bit of anti-seize on these, just to keep them from rusting up or anything. And this one's just gonna come right over. We're just gonna bolt this thing into place. So once we got the latch bolted down in place here, we can go ahead and adjust our U-nut here. And these are gonna be a 1/2" bolt, 1/2" nut. And the back sides are gonna be a 1/2". You're gonna thread those all the way down. And we're just gonna go ahead and tighten this up. Just to where it's kind of snug. We're gonna wanna get a nice little latch on there, just a little bit of force to push it down, keep it in place, and just a hair more. Once you got that tightened down, we can go ahead and cinch these locking nuts in place. And that's all it takes to install that. Now this thing can stretch a little bit over time. All you gotta do is obviously loosen up the lock nuts, tighten it down just a little bit more, and you should be good to go. All right, so that takes care of the installation of our T3 high clearance rear bumper with dual swing arms. If you have any questions or concerns, you can give us a call here at CBI Offroad. And for any of the other accessories, you can refer to our other videos for our swing arms.